Are you going to podcast today? Yes. Yes. Are you going to do sound check? Sound check. Let's get unbothered.
Everything bothers him.
He's unbothered.
He calls it unbothered, but that's what's cute because everything bothers him. He's bothered. I'm a botherina.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Unbothered by Rivera. That's right, it's Unbothered by Rivera. I'm your host, Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. This is Baby Girl, my co-host. Today we're going to actually talk about food because I went out to a really nice dinner last night with my two best friends, Thomasina and Derek. I think I talked about it like 2 weeks ago and said we were going to go to this restaurant called Durant's, which is like, it's a Phoenix institution. I've always seen it. I never knew it was a restaurant. I didn't know what Durant's was, to tell you the truth. And if you had asked me, I would have thought it was a Mexican spot. It turns out that it was one of the guys that worked for Bugsy Siegel, and he was like a casino pit master, pit boss, whatever he was. I'm not sure if there's a difference. I mean, like, I lived in Vegas long enough that I should know the or if there's a difference, but I don't, because I'm not really a gambler. And so the entire time I was in Vegas, I almost never gambled. Let me fix that. Okay, so what happened was the original plan was to pick Thomasina up at the airport at like 6, I believe it was. And so our dinner was scheduled for like 6:30 or something. And then the plane ended up getting delayed, and then the plane got delayed again, and then the plane got delayed again. And so we kept having to move the reservation, and thankfully Derek was completely willing to be that person because he's the one that handled like booking the reservation and stuff like that. And it's a really nice restaurant, and when you go in, you actually do see the old school Las Vegas mob influence of this place, because what happened was the guy was a pit boss. He had worked for Bugsy Siegel at the Flamingo back when that whole thing was happening and Vegas was becoming actually what Vegas is now. And then they decided that he was making too much money, so he must have been cheating the casino in some way, is the way that they saw it. So they put him out. He came to Phoenix. He started this restaurant called Durant's. And then the restaurant, I believe, has been around for 70-some years. I think they said 76 years or something like that. And so eventually the restaurant was going to, well, there's a situation where the guy died, the original guy, and he left his money and the restaurant because he didn't have anybody to leave it to, or anybody he wanted to leave it to. He went ahead and left it to his dog, and his dog had to get and this is true story, the server told us, like, I guess they tell you as part of the, like, so you know the history of the place. The dog had to get a fillet every day, so it was in the will. It was part of the thing. And so, that was part of the situation. And then eventually the dog died. And then a group bought it. And we had 45-day aged ribeye, and then mac and cheese. And the way it was going was Thomas ordered two sides. I ordered 2 sides, and then Derek was supposed to order 2 sides, but they ended up doing him dirty, and they were out of I think it was like rigatoni that was going to be the second side that he was going to get. And there were really no other good options, and we were just like, yeah, we've got all the sides we need anyway. If they're not going to have that rigatoni, then we might as well just skip that. And then I got yelled at because for some reason Derek insists that it was me that made it. So, because, when he ordered it, they were like, literally the last of that just got ordered. And because Thomas was so late, no shade, it wasn't his fault, it's just the plane. But because he was so late, we were sliding in as they were kind of closing. Like, technically they close at 10, but it's a really nice restaurant, and, it wasn't at all cheap. And, I typically go to all right restaurants, you know. I'm not trying to pretend like I'm a baller or whatever. But the deal is, I don't really eat out that much, you know, outside of like fast food here and there, because sometimes that's easier and quicker when I'm doing videos throughout the week and stuff. Sometimes it's like, okay, I can either completely mess up my kitchen right now in an effort to make myself dinner, or I can just buy something fast, like, you know, fast food. Or sometimes my version of fast food will be the hero spot, euro, gyro, depending on what part of the country or what part of the world you come from. So sometimes I'll go have that, which is one of my favorite things to get. I might get that tonight now that I'm actually thinking about it. But what I'm trying to get at is this restaurant was pricey. Like, you know, we had all made it the plan several months ago or whatever, or at least a month ago. And so I was really happy for it. And I was prepared for it to be whatever it was going to be. Technically, my part, you know, because we just split everything three ways is the way we do it usually, and don't really quibble about like little stuff or whatever, which, you know, I'm fine with either way. Like, you know, because everybody, like, the only time I don't like going out to dinner with other people is when people are truly what you can call cheap. Like, I have no problem with every person just paying for what they actually bought, if that's the way people want to do it. And I have no problem with, as long as it's within reason, splitting it, just splitting it equally, especially with, you know, Thomas and Derek, because nobody's cheap and also nobody's overdoing it, like as far as just being completely outlandish, you know, buying a bunch of drinks and you know, like that kind of stuff. And so, like, I'm cool with however we decide to do it. And so a lot of times we just split it three ways. And you know, like, my part ended up to being less than I thought it was going to be, or less than I had planned for, and by a lot, you know, or by quite a bit. And so, because I didn't know what to expect, and I was just like, you know, I looked at the menu online, but a lot of the things it said that, you know, the price varies. And almost everything it said that, which I understand why, you know, because there will be people that go into restaurants like that and they're like, well, I saw online on your menu that it said it was this much for this. And it's just like, okay, I don't know what we're doing right now, because you should know that things are subject to change when you're in a really nice restaurant, especially when some of the stuff on the menu, you know, like oysters, lobster, that kind of stuff, you almost always know that you're going to pay different prices, because it really does depend on market. That's why a lot of times it just says market where the price is, and then, you know, you can ask how much it is, or it will be listed. And in this case, pretty much everything I saw was listed. But anyway, so it was really good, but it was also kind of, because, you know, like I said, I usually go to all right restaurants if it's not fast, but then this one was like, you know, especially. But one of the reasons that I wanted to do it was because I may sometimes seem a little tired with, you know, like on the podcast, because I'm very honest with you guys about, like, you know, sometimes I'm just exhausted. Sometimes it's hot out. I've been working a lot, you know, like on videos and stuff like that. But things have been going really well. And I've seen, honestly, between when I started really paying attention to social media and now, I've seen so much growth, not only in my subscriber count, but also in like overall numbers, just all the way together, like views, everything, you know. And so I hit a bit of a milestone, a personal, you know, milestone over the last month or so. And so I wanted to actually celebrate that. And I didn't need to, and I don't feel the need to, turn the dinner into being about me. You know, we're here to celebrate. We're celebrating because Thomas was in town and we all three get to be together, which isn't, well, it is kind of rare. Like, it's happened a couple of times recently where we've all been able to be around each other, but you never know how life is going to turn out. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes even though we're just across town from each other, me and Derek don't even get to hang out that much, which I've told you guys before, I'm fine with. I'm not a needy friend where I feel like I'm not seeing you enough because, like, if I were to hit Derek with, I'm not seeing you enough, he'd be like, well, then why don't you call me? Like, why don't you just fix that if you feel like we're not hanging out enough? So it's not a complaint I would ever have, because if I ever really felt like, I needed some time with Derek, which sometimes I do need time with Derek and Thomas, because it's sometimes nice for me to be around other gay men who actually get it, and even though our opinions aren't always mirroring of each other. And I've told you guys, Derek would be polar opposite. It kind of goes like this. Like, if you were to look at it as far as the way the world would look at it and not the way we look at it, because we don't really think in these terms or talk in these terms when we're all together. We're just three friends talking as friends. But if you were to look at it that way, I would be far right. Like, as far as the rest of the world looks at it. Do I see myself as far right? Most definitely not. I was a Democrat or a liberal in the, I'm Gen X, so in the 90s and early 2000s. And then I'm one of the people where it's like, I didn't leave the Democratic Party. It left me because everything got too ridiculous and too carried away. And I don't want to get into politics, but for me and my thinking and what I was doing, and I get it, like a lot of you may not see politics the way I do. This isn't an invitation to argue. I don't mind what you put in the comments. I don't mind if you disagree with me in the comments, but please don't come at me sideways, because I'm really not trying to turn it into that kind of situation. But this is just what my experience has been, and I'm acknowledging that the world will see me a certain way, and I fully accept that. And the way that some people in the world would see me is being far right. And so then Thomas, he'd be more like, if you ask me, Thomas is more of a centrist. And so he's right in the middle, if you ask me. I mean, like, certain things were the same, certain things were different, whatever. Derek, according to a lot of the world, would be far left, but we're all gay men who have been out for a long time. Me out the longest. Me also the eldest of the group. I am the senior sister. I just have fun being silly. I can't help it. But I am the senior sister in the group. And easy on the word senior, not like that. But no. And so, when we get to be around each other, you never know what's going to happen. Like, as far as, there was a point where Thomas was considering taking a job across the country. And if that were to happen, then it would be fewer and further between that he'd be able to make it back to Arizona. And so and then Derek was also in Long Beach for a while there. I was in Austin. I've been in Vegas. Like, I've been moving around the most. And so so really that's what it was about, and that's what's to celebrate, is that we're all able to be in the same place and enjoy a really good meal together. And so, and Derek also, has been making some really good strides in his life, and so is Thomas. So that's why I say, it doesn't really make sense to just make it about my thing, because all of us are doing really well, as far as progressing in our life, and that's what should happen, and that's the way things should work. But I also know, on a personal note, that I'm going to have to go back to being a good boy again, because that's how I make the most progress in my life. And some people don't know this about me. People that have been hanging out with me for years do know this. I have phases where I just exercise extreme discipline. So during those phases, it will be going to the gym the way that I'm supposed to, watching my diet the way that I'm supposed to, not smoking any of the wacky tobacco, because that's the only thing that I do that could be considered like, well, outside of smoking cigarettes, which I have told you guys before, I have no interest in quitting smoking cigarettes. If that ever just naturally happens, like I just don't feel like smoking, then I won't smoke. But as far as like me making a conscious effort and like buying the gum or whatever else it would entail for me to have to quit the unnatural way is not something that I'm at all interested in. And so but I just have to go because I don't drink. And the wacky tobacco, it's only, like maybe once a week or sometimes every 2 weeks. But I need a good, and I hate to say this because once I say this on this video, I'm going to commit to it, but it doesn't start till Monday. So when you guys are in the chat with me on Sunday, I'll probably be a little elevated, let's say. But Monday, I'm going to start 6 months, which I realize is going to take Christmas and New Year's out of the game for like partying, But that doesn't mean I can't go out. That doesn't mean I can't enjoy myself, because I definitely can. I've proven that over and over. Like it's not. For me, those things are really fun sometimes. Like, I like getting silly. I like getting loose. I'm already kind of a spacey person, but I like that I get even more spacey. And, it's one of the things, like, if you saw, I don't know if anybody scrolled the comments from the last week's episode, but there was a guy in my comments that I'm assuming it's a guy, but they've never commented before, and I don't know if they just got fed my podcast through the algorithm, which, as far as this podcast and the algorithm goes, there are so many things that I would do because I have obviously my main channel, which, you pay attention to everything on your main channel, or I do, I should say. But if I wanted this podcast to be fed to random people on the algorithm, I would do completely different thumbnails. My thumbnails every week are some version of me with my dog. Like it's basically a still from the beginning of the video. That's the way that I make my thumbnails for these. And I would also talk about current events like I do on my regular video. There's so many things I would do if I wanted this podcast to get fed to like random people through the algorithm, but that's not at all what this podcast is intended for. Am I going to say that I don't like it if it does feed? Because yeah, I do. Because then there could be people that like what I'm talking about and want to hear me, but that's not the way that I run this particular podcast. This podcast is more for the people that actually pay attention to me, the people, my hardcore botherinas, of course, always, and really just people that want to see the more human side of me and the not edited side of me and just let me ramble a little bit. But the comment said like something like, why do you have all those piercings? I noticed them and I couldn't take you seriously. And I'm paraphrasing from memory, so forgive me. I didn't screenshot it or which if I ever wanted to, I could do that with different things, obviously. But, it's again, this podcast is supposed to be loose. And so I don't want to do research. I don't want to do homework for my podcast. But my point is, he was letting me know that because of my piercings, he doesn't take me seriously. Well, what made you think that I was looking to be taken seriously? Did it ever occur to you that maybe a part of the reason that I've done all the things that I've done to myself as far as tattoos and piercings was so that people wouldn't take me seriously? Like, I think that's something that a lot of people don't really factor into the equation when they're dealing with a person like me. It was like, when I first started out in life, not in comedy, but in life. And then we can get to comedy in a second, or when I first started out in comedy and what was going on there. I was very as all American as a Latino boy can be. Like, that's a good way to describe me. I was very boy next door, when I was a young boy. And that had definite advantages to it. And that was, a thing that in my life, I think I always knew that would have a shelf life for me, because there was a long time when I wanted tattoos and piercings, but I knew I couldn't get them. And this was back, when I was escorting. And so, you can say like, oh, I'm in charge of everything when I do that, because, I make so much money and I work for myself. And because I didn't work for an agency, I worked for, I was listed by an agency for a while, but I never saw the benefit to actually working for them. And then the one time that I was willing to take, because, they would hit me up and it's like, it would be like competing with myself, because they would hit me up, and I guess maybe I'll go into that a little bit so you guys understand how that world works. Because like sometimes people hire people like that, S workers, and then they're like, yeah, they sent me somebody that didn't look anything like the ad I responded to. And that's because that's an agency. And that's what they would do with all of us. They'd have you listed and they'd have like, a description that would fit you. But then if somebody called on that description and you weren't available and nobody that was similar to you was available, they would just send out absolutely anybody. And they didn't even make an effort, to tell you the truth, to send you out as the first one when people called on the ad that fit your description. That's the way agencies worked. And then agencies also, and this was most of the agencies in Las Vegas. And, maybe some of the featured entertainers who have been in movies, those people maybe have a little more control or whatever. But for the most part, the agency takes the full booking fee, and what they consider the booking fee is what you actually go there for. So you're in Vegas, and let's say at that time, like the booking fee was $150 or $200, and the agencies don't want to tell the clients that it's an agency. So they play it like it's just one of the guys. Technically, it's you. It's the person they're sending. Or sometimes they will let it be known that it's like an operator or whatever, like a person that sends you out. It depends on the agency, but and it depends on the schedule, to tell you the truth, because sometimes it's all just kind of, a piece of gum and a Band-Aid is how I would describe the way a lot of the agencies work. And they make so much money. But the reason they make so much money is because they don't care about anything. Like quality control isn't a thing. Making sure that the workers, because I got to watch my, the way I say things, because YouTube doesn't like certain things. And I get that and I respect it. But that's why if you see me like searching for words, I'm not searching for the story. I'm searching for the best way to tell the story that's still acceptable to YouTube. And so what happens is they don't, like, people can be on substances that make them not only, because I've seen guys and girls that were basically getting driven to calls by drivers that were literally out of it, like nodding out from things, or just like, on so many pills and stuff. And the agency doesn't care, because the agency just wants the money. Just like when it comes to who's answering the phone, ideally they would want you to feel like you're talking to the person that you're actually going to book, because that establishes that personal relationship, and it's more likely, or that one-to-one relationship, and it's more likely to get the call booked. And so, but But they didn't care if that didn't happen. If it's like, okay, well, we would usually have a guy answer this phone, but today all we have are girls here. The guys have called in, or the guys aren't, manning the phones. And so we're just going to use the girls, and that's what it's going to be. And so, but then, okay, so like I said, say it's $150 to $200 that they charge for the booking fee. Well, on the phone, the guys will be asking certain things, like if certain things are possible, or they're going to be able to do certain things. And for legal reasons, there's certain things that they can't just say. But the operator, because their job is to actually book the call, will basically say that you're like imply, not say, but imply that you're going to do whatever this person wants. That's the way they try to lead people on. So now when you get there, they think that they're going to give you $150 to $200. And they have every right to think this because they're being led to believe that by the operator. And that you're basically going to do whatever they want. Well, what they don't know is, in case you guys don't remember from just a few seconds ago when I said it, you're not getting any of that money. Not a dollar of that money are you getting. And like, this is such a thing that you're not getting any of that money, that sometimes when they were really desperate, because like I told you guys, I would not, because I don't like, a friend of mine that was a trans woman that I've talked about before, that she made a lot of money, and she made a lot of money even with the agency. She would do independent and the agency. I did, for the most part, just independent. But she was telling me how great she would do off the agency. And she was like, sometimes when your ad's slow, then it's cool because the agency hits you up and then you work for them. Well, there's a different sell for a trans woman than there is an actual male, or just a plain male, because a trans woman is considered a specialty. And so they will be willing to give more money because they know they're, especially like my friend, she was so beautiful and, still fully intact, not bottom surgery, but had really beautiful, like a beautiful body, like curves and everything, definitely very passable and very, very pretty. And so she was, able to finesse these people out of thousands of dollars. But when you're there for $150 to $200, and the agency is getting all of that money, and then it's going to be up to you to finesse this person and get them to tip you above that, it's not putting you in a fair situation. Because if you're going for that same amount as like your own thing, you're already getting that money. So when you want them, because you're always going to upsell them, you're always going to get more money or try to get more money than what you actually go there for. Like, that's just the way that it works. And a lot of people don't understand that because they're wherever they're at in the world, and or in the country, and sometimes the world, a lot of times the world, but they're used to like one price. And it's always like, yeah, that's not the way Vegas works. But since I'm not getting any of that money, because you got to think, if I'm taking that first amount of money and that's going directly to me, then to have me do other things and be more fun is going to be less money than it would be if I go in, I don't get any of that money, because now I have to make up for that money that I didn't get from I'm telling too much about this, but who cares? It's not like I'm ever going to go back to that business again. And but also, like, on the phone, when I would be handling my own thing, because like, if you work for yourself, obviously I didn't have an operator working for me ever. I didn't have anybody handling any part of that business for me when I was doing it from my own ads. And so I would be very clear with people that, like, that's the base for me to go. And then from there, we can discuss anything else. And so I would always word it in a way where people would know that more than likely that's not all that I'm going to be requesting of you, or that's not what the entire transaction. It can be the entire transaction if you just want a base type situation. That's fine. And I don't mind either way, because, I mean, like, when you're so young, and this was back in the late 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, if you're making $200 for, in all honesty, a lot of times you're there for 10 minutes, 15 minutes at the most. And that's not an exaggeration. And even when you get even more money than that, it's still 15 minutes, 20 minutes. It's like no time at all. And if you're a person like me, because I was super busy, I would say for for several years when I was in Las Vegas, I was literally the only Latino working the magazines. Like, I was literally the only one. And, people look at me now, and obviously I've been surgically altered. But like I said, at that time, I looked very much like boy next door, Latino boy. And so I was banking, and so, like, who cares if you only get $200? You're doing as little as possible, because I was the king of saying no. And people like that, and so you're doing as little as possible, and you're making $200 per person. And so, like, to get $1,000 in a day can quickly happen. You're in Vegas, and so you just, and that's on like a day where you're just doing base type stuff, and so, there were plenty of times when I would just be more focused on partying and enjoying my life, because there was, like, even though there was a fair amount of me, like, not going out and not being crazy. Back then, I used to really party, and when I would go out, I would go out. And when I'd be on one, I would definitely be on one. But there were plenty of times when I would take, like, days off, where I just wouldn't feel like dealing with anybody. But like I said, if you're making enough money on the days that you are working, like, really, how much money do you need, especially in the 90s and early 2000s, like, if you make $2,000 a week even, and living in Vegas at that time, Vegas was very inexpensive at that time. Even now, Vegas isn't as expensive as a lot of people would think it is. Vegas is actually a very affordable place to live. And so, I really didn't have to think about a lot. I didn't really have to worry about a lot. But my point is, they are so, like, willing to jack you with the agencies, that, like, the way that it worked, because, like I said, I signed up because my friend was like, I make really good money and then when I add both of them together, it's really great, because sometimes I'm busy on my ad, and then the agency is busy too, so they're hitting me up, and I was sold on it. I was like, I'm gonna go do it. And, like, the agency, the girls that handled me and stuff like that, as far as my intake, and because you do fill out forms, you do have to. I believe I had to do, like, a sheriff's card for that. Like, you're basically hired as kind of a dancer, like, that's the way they do it. So it's kind of the same stuff as, like, working for a strip club in Vegas. So you have to get your sheriff's card and some stuff like that. I believe that's the way that we had to do it. And the girl was very impressed by me all the way around, or she was like, you look good, you smell good. Because, obviously, if I'm going to show up in that capacity, especially being that I'm already working, doing my own ads and stuff like that, I know the way that I'm supposed to look. I know the way that, I know what people want from me, or what they want to see. And so, I showed up looking the way that I was supposed to look. And so they were very impressed by me, and they took a picture of me for their records, so they would know who they're sending out and stuff like that. But then, when I really, like I said, after, the initial, like, oh, I'm just going to do this and I'm going to make more money. After the initial hit me, it was just like, yeah, I don't want to go do that and, like, take them my money afterwards. And they had the old school credit card. Like they would let you use like a credit card, not a slot. It was the old school carbon copy. And I'm not even joking. But you always carried a backpack with you anyway. Like that's a part of the way that you did it, like, cause you had a backpack with stuff you needed inside of it. And so, so it wasn't anything to just add that to the backpack, but it's a very cumbersome, like the whole process was just like, and then also you had to take a picture of them. That was another thing. Was it a picture? That part I don't remember. There was a way that you had to do it though, so that you had proof. And like I said, I never actually ended up, like it was all explained to me. And then I never ended up doing it because I was just like, I don't want to collect money for them. Like, that's what I'm doing. I'm collecting money for them. And then also, here's the other thing a lot of people don't pay attention to. This is where it gets unsafe. Because on the phone, the person that they're dealing with has promised all sorts of things. Well, not promised, but alluded to the fact that you're going to do all sorts of things. And you have no idea what that is. These people are going to expect that from you. And like I said, I never worked for that particular agency, but I had actually done calls on the one-off for 2 different agencies. One of them was here in Phoenix when I was first starting out. And the other one was this independent, also in Phoenix, where I came for a visit. And then another time in Vegas, it was for a guy that was also independent, but he would sometimes send other guys out, like if he was too busy and he wasn't able to do it himself. And so, I had done the various kinds of like splits and stuff like that. And I never liked it because, like I said, they would basically promise things that you weren't going to do. And now this person feels like you have robbed them. And now, because I don't know if you guys know what it's like when a person feels like you've robbed them, but it's not a comfortable situation. So a person feels like you've robbed them because here's the deal, and I've talked about this before too. Even as honest as I was with people in what I was doing, because I didn't want to deal with those headaches, and I was making enough money that I didn't have to deal with those headaches. So like me trying to mislead people, were there times that I was just a bitchy kid and like did rude things because I was kind of spoiled and yeah, for sure. But was I lying to people and ripping them off? Most definitely not. But there will still be people that will treat you like that, And like I had one guy literally try to hold me in a room at the MGM Grand. It was close to when the MGM Grand, well, not close to when it first opened. It would have been open for several years, but it was still one of the newer casinos on the Strip. And he was very upset with me, but that was my money, all of it. What he had given me was all my money, and I had not been dishonest with him in any way. And I was just really pissed off because it was like, you're trying to get money back from me because you're trying to pretend that I misled you in some way, which I most definitely did not. And now you're trying to hold me in your hotel room because he locked me in, pushed, and he was a bigger guy, And so then he was accusing me of having basically robbed him. And I was just like, that's not what happened. You and I both know that's not what happened. Well, and I'll never forget, he was from Modesto, California, and he was a married man. And he was like, because, we chatted a little bit, obviously, when I first came in. When I first came in, everything was cool. Everything was standard. It was whatever. It was like a normal. And sometimes I wouldn't chat at all. I mean, if they wanted to chat, I was fine to chat. But if there was really a no chat situation, just the bare minimum, I don't care where you're from. I don't care I don't care about any of that stuff. You either have this money or you don't. That's all it was for me. You know what I mean? It wasn't and I was very go with the flow. I didn't care either way. Like I said, I'm obviously I can speak, and I was able to speak back then. So if somebody wanted to talk to me, I was fine to talk to them. If they wanted to just keep it chill, cool too. And so he had told me that he was from Modesto. And so that was part of the thing when he got mad at me. He was like, well, in Modesto, I give this much money and I get everything. And I was like, well, this isn't Modesto. This is Las Vegas. And I don't really understand. And so what he did was, because he said that I was trying, he was like, you know what? You're trying, like, I remember him like leveling with me, you know, he was like, you know what? You're trying to rob me right now, and I am going to call hotel security. And in my head, I remember like my state of mind when this happened so clearly, because, you know, it's like, I guess it should be a traumatic situation because I was being held in a hotel room against my will. But at the same time, you know, I've lived kind of a warped life because I chose to live a warped life. You know, there's a lot of my life, there's certain parts of my life that were like, you know, traumatic because circumstance, you know, or just things that happened to me. That would be true. It's not something I usually concentrate on because who cares about that? That was out of your control. It's not, I don't hold any like feelings about that really, you know, especially at my big age. At different points in my life, there were ways that it affected me. I figured that out for myself. It is what it is. It was what it was. It ain't what it ain't. But this one was funny to me because it's all kind of self-imposed, you know, like all the way around. Like, really, if I wanted that situation to end right then, I could have just given him his money back. I could have literally just given him his money back. But that wasn't going to happen. And I knew that wasn't going to happen. But when he was like, I'm going to call security, in my head, I was like, bluffing. But I'm not going to say that to him. You know, I'm just like, okay, well, I guess if that's what you have to do, then that's what you have to do. But we both know that that's not what happened. And so I don't know what number he dialed, you know, like if he dialed 1 or what he did, but he didn't dial 0, you know, and I didn't like look at his fingers to know. I don't care. I can't see. I don't care. So he dials or hits whatever button he hits and then is like, security, I have somebody in my room that is trying to rob me. And that's the way he said it, you know, like very, like he was a little princess or something, you know. Security, I have, and he, like I said, a married man, whatever, you know, straight guy. And so I'm leaning against the like not nightstand, what would it, the drawers. I'm leaning against it, just waiting. And, you know, he's called security, and it's been like, you know, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And we're just sitting there staring at him. And I just looked at him and I was like, you know, for this to be such a nice hotel, this security is taking a really long time to get here. Maybe I'll see if I can help them along. And I picked up his phone and I literally dialed 0 right in front of him, made sure he saw it. Boom, 0. And then I was like, yeah, I'm being held in a room against my will right now. Could you send somebody up right away? And they were like, they said they would. They were like, yes, sir, or whatever. That I just like hung up the phone and I was like, let's see how your wife likes this story. And then what he did was he like waited like maybe 20, 30 seconds at the most. And he walked over to the door and he unlocked the top latch and he opened the door and he was like, get the hell out. And like, I like, it felt like when I was young and like one of my parents would want to like give me a spanking, but they were telling me to get in my room at the same time. And I had to slide past them without getting spanked, you know, like, cause they'd either have the belt or give a quick, like, I don't know if anybody else grew up like that or not, but, you know, I'm Gen X, and so it wasn't that thing, like, you know, it was abuse or whatever. But it felt like that because I was like, is he going to try to hit me when I'm on my way out or whatever? I'm just going to have to scoot past him because, you know, it's what it is, and I need to get out of here. And I'll never forget that day was one of the few times I had a friend drive me. It was my friend Toby that I had drive me. And because I knew, because I was bluffing too in a way, because I acted very confident about that, you know, where it was like, let's see how your wife reacts to this. But I knew that even though I was in the right and I wasn't robbing him, I still knew what I was doing in that hotel was illegal, because that's not illegal. That's not legal in Clark County. Everybody thinks that that's legal in Las Vegas. It's not. It's legal in, I think, 2 counties in Nevada. One of them is Nye County, and I'm not sure of the other one, or if there still is another one. But at a point, I know there were 2 counties that it was legal in. Clark County, which is where Las Vegas is not. It is not legal, and I know that for a fact. And I knew that for a fact then. And so I was bluffing on being so confident in calling security, because I knew that best case scenario, I was going to be 86 from that hotel, which when they 86 you from a hotel over that, you're 86 from every hotel that is in a conglomerate with that one. So like, like if you get 86 from like the Orleans, for example. Well, the Orleans also owns the Gold Coast, the Barbary Coast, and I think one other hotel. So you're 86 from all 3 of those hotels. And so I don't know who else was in business with MGM. But I know that, I was definitely going to get 86 from MGM. And I didn't know how they were going to handle the money situation, like if they would make me give that back, or if they would like try to get me put up on charges, because obviously they don't want you doing that. So my point is, since I knew that that was happening, and I know that if you're saying, that's one thing I will say about Vegas. If you say that you're being held in a hotel room against your will, they will send somebody right away. And so with him having already ate up the 30 seconds that he ate up, like waiting after I made that call, I know the security is headed up the elevator. And so what I did was I took the opposite way. Instead of going towards the elevator banks, I went to the opposite way at the end of the hall and ran down the stairs. And so I ran down the stairs. My friend Toby is waiting in the now that I remember, that wasn't the MGM. That's what it was. It was Mirage. And the reason that I remember it was Mirage was because Toby was waiting for me at the, what's it called? The Rainforest Bar. It's not the Rainforest Cafe. It's the bar in the middle of Mirage. I don't even know if Mirage is still a hotel in Las Vegas. I didn't check the last time I was there. But and Mirage owns, because that was a Steve Wynn property, and so Mirage owned Treasure Island at that time. It was Treasure Island, Mirage, and I believe Bellagio had already opened at that time too. So you were going to be 86 from those 3 hotels. And so I ran over to Toby in the, what's it called? And I was like, we got to get out of here. And he was having a drink. And then I was like, I'll give you your money back for the drink, but let's get out of here right now. And so he was like, okay. And I like literally grabbed, because I didn't want to tell him why we had to leave right then. But we definitely had to leave right then. And so I remember grabbing him by the wrist and like walking him with me, and the car was in valet. And so I was nervous. His car was in valet. And so I was nervous, like waiting for valet, because, like the way the hotels are set up, you're on the cameras. And I think what happened was once, because, everything's so well tracked. I don't think that I was just such a secret agent that me going down those stairs made it so they didn't have any idea where I was. I'm sure they tracked me leaving the hotel. But I would imagine what they thought was, this is kind of a crisis averted situation, because now we don't have to do the paperwork on it. We also don't have to figure out what went wrong or how it went down. Like, all they had to do was deal with their guest and just let him know, because at that point he's the one that's in trouble, because they're just going to be like, well, you shouldn't be inviting people like that to your room. Like, that's not supposed to be what you're doing at this hotel. And so, like, trying to make it a thing with me at that point wasn't beneficial to any party involved, especially me. But it wasn't beneficial to them. It wasn't beneficial to the hotel. Like, there was no way that this was gonna, like, help them out. And so they just, but they always have eyes on you. And, Mirage at that time was one of the best, it really was one of the best hotels on the strip at that point. And so we got out of there, and I was very lucky for that. And that was a really long way for me to say that because people did like that all-American look and very boy next door look, I couldn't have piercings. I couldn't have tattoos. And like I said, I always wanted that since I was very young. Like, piercings didn't really become a thing until right around that same time that I was doing things, but I wanted them so bad. And there was a point where I had a lip piercing right here when I was young, and it's still doing the regular jobs, and it wasn't working for that either. Like, nobody wanted to, like, people wouldn't hire you. Like, now I see people with piercings and tattoos everywhere I go, and I'm not a hater. I'm happy for those people that they're able to express themselves, the young people that they're able to express themselves. But I do remember, I was like, yeah, when I was younger, you couldn't even get a job if you had piercings, like visible piercings and visible tattoos, and you had to get everything, above your sleeves, and like definitely not the hands or the face. Like, there's some places that still won't hire you with face tattoos and that kind of stuff, but I'm not looking to be hired anywhere, so I don't worry about any of that stuff. But my point is, you could say at that point in my life, I was taken seriously on a lot of levels, even though I was super young. But my goal was never to be taken seriously in that way. Like, people take me seriously when I need them to. Like, if I'm in a store buying something, people take me seriously. When we went to that expensive dinner last night, people took me seriously. When I'm dealing with a valet, people take me seriously. That's when I need people to take me seriously, and only on the level that I am a paying customer. So treat me like a person that's giving you money. Treat me like a person that's going to tip you. Treat me like a person that's going to drive up your commission, because obviously if I'm buying something and you work off commission, you're going to make money off the sale. That's when I need you to take me seriously. But outside of that, I'm not looking for people to take me seriously. A lot of my videos on my main channel, even, like, I'll wear a wig to be silly. I'll say silly pun type things that I wouldn't even say on stage because they're just funny and they're quippy and they're in the moment and we have a good time with it. I'm there to entertain you. I don't need you to take, I'm not Dan Rather. I'm not Ted Koppel. I'm not Peter Jennings. I think all of them are dead. Well, Dan Rather might as well be dead. His career's over because, he was... he kind of screwed himself on a couple tales that he told. But I'm not any of these people, so it's not like, this is serious news right now from the most trusted name in it's it's not that kind of situation, and especially when I'm doing my podcast, like I was saying, that's really not what I'm going for. I want you guys to really just enjoy the conversation. Like, if I wanted to be taken seriously, I wouldn't have just told you that whole story about Vegas. You know what I mean? Like, that's the other thing. I realized that because I'm willing to share these kinds of stories, even though, it's been years and years and years, I realize that some people could still judge me on any part of the story. They could be like, well, you had to be being dishonest on some level in order for him to feel like you're dishonest. So you kind of are a thief. Okay, well, then there we are. Or, well, if you did that kind of work, then you're obviously not morally the type of person. Okay, well, then strike me off for that. There's people that even have a problem with the fact that I'm gay. Okay, well, there's that too. It's like, there's people that feel like, I should have worked regular jobs. Well, maybe I'm one of them every once in a while. Maybe sometimes I think about when I was much younger, and there was this I had worked for a grocery store when I was super young, and I was a bag boy. Back then, they used to call them courtesy clerks. And it was the regular job, like, teenage job or whatever, that I was actually had the longest, they were the most abusive with me. I hated them. One day I'll tell the full story of, they were just terrible with me all the way around. They made me never want to work regular jobs again, and that's 100% true. But you don't think where you can go next or what the other options are. You're just kind of stuck in that. That's why I'm glad for the way my life turned out, because my life has taken so many twists and turns that anything's possible, and I know that, so I don't live under the guise that, anything I don't want to do or anything I want to do isn't possible. Everything is possible. Are you willing to figure out how you're going to get there? That's what the trick is. Do you want to? Because if you want it bad enough, you'll figure it out. I ended up on TV. I'm from Casa Grande, Arizona. I should have never been on TV. I've toured with some of the biggest comics in the world. I've done stand-up everywhere. So, like, I am not at all I realized I had no show business connections at all. I knew absolutely nobody when I moved to LA. Nobody in the comedy industry, nobody in the entertainment industry in general. I had no help doing anything. And so I definitely know that anything is possible as long as you're willing to figure out how you're going to create your path to get there, But at that time, I really was like, you work a regular job, like that was my thinking. And there was a grocery store that was in the same neighborhood that I lived in, because I wasn't working for that grocery store anymore. I finally quit that after putting up with a lot from them. And I had always wanted to be a cashier, which some people are going to make fun of me, but I always wanted to be a cashier. I always did. I don't now, but when I was young, I did. We used to play store when I was little, and we would, back then they didn't have the scanner. So, well, by the time I started doing, what's it called, we had the scanner, but by the time I started working, but when I was a kid, we used to do the, we used to pretend to be doing the actual cash register. And so I always wanted to be a cashier. And then when I was working as a courtesy clerk, I knew the cashiers made decent money, and a lot of money in my, young mind, and compared to what I was making being a courtesy clerk. And so I really wanted to be a cashier, and I applied for a grocery store that was around the corner from where I was living, so it would have been perfect. It's like, not even a 2-minute drive, literally. It's right around the corner from where I lived. It was an Extra when Extra was in Phoenix. And I had the experience of being a courtesy clerk, and I applied, and they actually hired me. And I was so happy that they hired me to be a cashier. I was going to be a cashier. And they told me what day I had to come in for, like orientation, and so that they could, start training me and stuff like that. And I was so excited. And then I started dating this guy in the, because it was like maybe a week out that I was supposed to like go back for whatever. And I started dating this guy, and he had money and he had a business, and he, I was new to being actually out, and he was like my first, you could say, real relationship. And I didn't realize he was abusive, and I didn't realize that relationships weren't supposed to be like that. But he basically told me that being a cashier wasn't shit, and I wouldn't make money anyway, and that I might as well just work for him, and then he could have access to me whenever he wanted to, and he would give me way more money than they would give me being a cashier anyway. And in a way, he was right, or he wasn't lying about that. And he had already, he was so, into me, but really it was about controlling me. It wasn't about really loving me, but I didn't know this because I didn't know anything about actually being in relationships and the way that people were supposed to treat you. And it was, all of that, all of that stuff. And so more than anything, because I didn't really care what he said about not making shit, and I was like that was the money I wanted to make, like, so that part didn't bother me. But more than anything, because it was one of those situations where we started dating, and right away he started really going with what now would be considered love bombing, which I don't really know if I buy into that whole idea of love bombing, but it is whatever. We're not going to get sidetracked on like the terminology now and the terms people use now and know now, as opposed to what I was dealing with when I was younger and what we were dealing with. But I thought that in order to be loyal to him, since he supposedly loved me and he wanted to marry me, and and it was all right away. He took me to Vegas on our first date or whatever, and that's how I originally saw Vegas. This was before a lot of that stuff, or a lot of things. So I listened to him, and I took the easy way out, and I did not show up for to be a cashier, to do my orientation and stuff like that. And that's one of the few regrets that I have in my actual life, because I don't live my life regretting a lot of things. And I don't live in a constant state of regret over that now. It's just every once in a while I think about it, and I was like, what would my life have been like if I had just taken that more conventional path and actually been a cashier? And then I think I probably would have found a way to turn it all into a mess again anyway. So it is what it is. And it ain't what it ain't. Stay unbothered.